Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Retro Gaming Tech.com video, we're going to be discussing as well as analysing tech news, which as usual, has popped up in the past 24 or so hours. Hopefully you're having an amazing day. We've got a ton of stuff to get through in today's video. I want to begin though with an update for the RX 6800 XT. While we do have a leaked benchmark, the real nugget of gold here is actually concerning the noise levels, drivers, and temperature of the card. And we'll get into that in just a moment, but first, a quick message from the video's sponsor. Before we get into the video itself, I'd like to say that this video is sponsored by Boost Gaming. They provide the world's most secure way of purchasing a gaming credit online. They work with brands such as Sony, Microsoft, Nintendo, Google, Blizzard directly. And of course your purchases are 100% secure with instant delivery, and you can be certain of the very best prices possible. You can head over to boostgaming.com via the affiliate link in the description to pick up your purchase. The 3D Mark benchmark has actually been leaked by a Chinese forum member on Beidou, and this information seems to indicate that the 6800 XT will indeed compete rather favourably, as we've seen from other benchmarks, with the RTX 3080. A Twitter user by the name of Harakaze5719 has thrown the score along with the average results of an RTX 3080 and RTX 2080 Ti, and there's also an estimated score for the 6900 XT as well as the RTX 3090. According to these results, the 6800 XT does seem to be slightly behind the RTX 30. This matches perfectly with what we're seeing from AMD and Nvidia across the board, really, with these GPUs, with AMD taking some victories and Nvidia taking other victories. I'm also providing my own benchmarks of Times by Extreme of the Founders Edition RTX 3080 and RTX 3070, just for your FYI. And this was being tested on a 10900K. Power limits and everything else are at default with the FE cards. This was actually part of my RTX 3070 Founders Edition review, which I will also link in the video description. Of course, these results for AMD may also not be final results, because for all we know, there could be a driver update which will improve performance. But speaking of drivers, this is also the main crux of the matter for me. The leaker who got hold of the card said that the drivers that they currently have are very stable. They haven't experienced any crashes, no like random hiccups, which is obviously a really good thing. The first generation of RDNA was interesting when it came to drivers. I personally had absolutely zero issues. I tested the card. I was sent an RX 5700 from AMD directly, and I've also been given a couple of other cards by them. I've got the 5600 and 5500. One of those might have been sent by MSI. I honestly don't remember offhand. But yeah, I've tested all three of those GPUs, and I have not been able to have any crashes, including when I tested the 5700 kind of close to launch. And that was on an AMD system, a 3700X, and I also tested them on a couple of Intel systems, and I couldn't get any crashes at all. But I do know people were experiencing issues, particularly with multi-monitor configurations. But to my knowledge anyway, the driver issues have been very much resolved and improved by AMD, and it seems that this has really culminated with the drivers now that we see with RDNA 2, RX 6000 series. The triple fan design is, according to this information, slightly noisy. We don't have exact dB measurements, but okay, that's fine. It's slightly noisy. I can live with that, honestly. But they have said that the temperatures are, quote, excellent, end quote. There is no specifics as to what the temperatures are. And we can probably imagine that there's different modes anyway that you can run the card. And obviously, AMD do provide a lot of tweaking options, and we can also run the cards in rage mode if you want, which is basically kind of like an overclocked mode, which as you would imagine, increases performance. Yeah, so I think that these cards are going to be excellent. The 6800 XT is going to cost just 649, which was bang on with what I was hearing and I'd leaked before the announcement even. AMD wanted to undercut Nvidia. I was told that that was their plan all along, to be slightly cheaper than Nvidia, but be rather competitive in terms of traditional rasterization performance. We know, of course, that there's going to be a DLSS, and I say it in such a tone because obviously it's AMD's own technology, and that is going to work across the board. It's going to work with Xbox as well as PlayStation, and of course it's going to work with desktop GPUs, and this is something that's absolutely brilliant. I I was very happy that my information there when I reported that AMD were working on upsampling technology was accurate, because I think that even a card such as an RTX 3080, I'm not saying that the card's slow by any stretch of the imagination, it really isn't, but I think upsampling tech now is so good that, quite frankly, especially if you're playing at a slight distance, kind of the optimum distance, you're not kind of zooming into the image by like 300, 400%, you really cannot tell the difference between upsampled DLSS on something like Death Stranding versus a native 4K image. And obviously, if you're running something like hardware-based ray tracing, it doesn't really matter the card, it's just so demanding. So I think having upsampling technology is going to be incredibly important for next generation visuals, excuse me, not videos, whether that's on AMD, the consoles, or Nvidia. Speaking of Nvidia, the mystery of the RTX 3080 Ti continues. There were a lot of rumours just recently that the RTX 3080 20GB was cancelled, and I pretty much confirmed this from my own sources. Then I was hearing of an RTX 3080 Ti, and this card had slightly fewer CUDA cores than the 3090. It had 9984. COPT7 Kimi provided those numbers, and I subsequently confirmed them with 12GB of memory. And then it seems that this is cancelled. Now, there is still the 3080 Ti, but instead it's slightly different in terms of its configuration. Now we have 10,496 CUDA cores. And you're going to put your hand up and say, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. That's the same number of CUDA cores as the RTX 3090. Okay, this is true, but the GPU has 20GB of memory rather than 24GB of memory. It's still using GDDR6X, although as of the time that I'm recording this video, there is no information concerning the clock frequencies of the GPU. Honestly, this is quite interesting. We do know that Nvidia were testing multiple variants of the RTX 3080 Ti, but the one that was ahead, at least when I kind of checked a few days ago, was the 12GB model, which had slightly fewer CUDA cores. And I do wonder how we're going to get memory bandwidth to feed all of those CUDA cores. I mean, again, we don't know clock frequencies. Then again, none of this is 100% confirmed, of course, by NVIDIA. So I wonder if the memory is going to run faster than an RTX 3080. This does match one thing, though. I had reported previously, I think it was when I mentioned that the RTX 3080 20GB model was cancelled. I honestly have lost track at the moment. There's so many rumours concerning NVIDIA GPUs, but I had reported that, to my knowledge, NVIDIA had a rather large inventory of high capacity DRAM. They'd basically bought it for the 20GB card. So it's possible that this is why NVIDIA are using this, and they don't feel that having a premium product with 12GB is enough, or maybe they just feel that it's more market conditions, that they want to be able to sell the Ti, stating that it has more RAM than, let's say, the RX 6900 XT. Then again, maybe it's just that they want to use up the RAM. Who the hell knows? I mean, at the end of the day, none of this is confirmed. It's going to be fascinating if this is true, because with the RTX 3080 Ti, I'd heard that Nvidia were going to be ultra aggressive with the price. Um, I was hearing between 899 and 999, but now, if this is with all of those additional CUDA cores, which is basically the same configuration as the RTX 3090, albeit with just cuts in memory, I'd be interested to see how they priced this thing, and also how they would even market it, because this is going to be a really similar configuration to the RTX 3090. Um, with a 12 GB versus a 24 GB card, yeah, sure. In terms of gaming performance, you're not really going to notice the difference. But in terms of professional workloads, yes, you might. The extra RAM can make all of the difference with like high-end 3D modeling or what have you. It's possible, though, that the less bandwidth, because obviously it's a 384-bit bus with the 390 versus the 320 of the 3080 Ti. This is assuming that they don't use faster memory. Maybe that will help to separate the two, but yeah, it's really weird. I will say that the 30 series for the Founders Edition cards, it overclocks insane on memory. The 3070, which of course is a very different memory configuration. But with my 3070, when I was testing it, it hit like, I think it was like 1.3 gigahertz overclock, something like that. I can't remember offhand. I know it's way past 1 gigahertz. I was like, I actually, because I wasn't paying no real attention, and I didn't have the OSD on when I was doing the initial overclocking. And there was like a part of me that when it got to like 700 megahertz overclock on the memory, 800, I was actually wondering if it was broken. I was kind of like, is this overclock really working? Like, is Afterburner really applying these clock frequencies? So I double checked on the OSD and it was like, yep, the memory really is overclocking quite well. And the RTX 3080 Founders Edition card, I haven't played around with overclocking so much, but it does overclock fairly well with my sample. I don't remember the frequency, so it's something like 600 megahertz. I don't remember exactly because I haven't really tried overclocking it too much. But yeah, so there is definitely headroom there for Nvidia to launch faster cards. Finally, with Copa 7 Kimi, there is also some information that the desktop variants of the RTX 3060, this is the non-TI variant, just for your FYI, so it's the vanilla 3060. It's going to feature 3840 FP32 and the RTX 3050 Ti, it's going to be cut even further, as you would imagine. It's going to be just 3584. Copa 7 Kimi has also said that NVIDIA's Hopper architecture, which is the successor, of course, to Ampere, it is going to be utilizing TSMC's 5nm process, which is the same process as Apple's A14. He's also said that I don't think this is news. Both Hopper 100 and GH20X will use TSMC 5nm. It's too early to talk about them. Everything can change. I'm actually, the scuttlebutt, the rumor is that both Hopper as well as RDNA 3 are actually kind of bonkers. That there is some substantial differences in performance of these architectures, and they're not just like a small stepping stone. The rumor with both of them, for a start, is that they are chiplet designs, especially with Hopper. We've seen NVIDIA really be testing out MCM designs. And I would also like to throw in to this video some discussions I've had with a developer for the PlayStation 5. Now, this information I want you to take as very unverified. This source has not given me information previously. I repeat, this is not one of my traditional sources. So this is not one of my, AMD sources or the Sony sources that I've used previously. They have confirmed to me that they are a developer. However, I am unable to independently verify their information. I would take this as not comparisons against the Xbox. I actually have been holding on to this information for a couple of weeks now, but given the PS5 NDAs are almost over, although I don't honestly know how much of this stuff will be discussed immediately, hopefully a lot, um, I figure I'll throw it out. Again, I do not want you to take this as confirmation of features. This is a lot less certain on my part versus a lot of the other stuff that I've said of the consoles, and especially for AMD architectures. Obviously, I've got a lot of good AMD and Intel and NVIDIA sources. I've leaked quite a bit about the PS5 in the past, but this developer wishes to remain anonymous for obvious reasons, because technically they have given me information close to when NDAs are starting to expire, but with that said, they are still breaking NDAs. But there is some stuff that they have told me that has matched up with what my other sources have told me, and I'm just going to throw it in here. So I'm reporting this as that's interesting rather than this is a leak. With that said, with the caveats out of the way, there are some interesting things. So I asked him, first of all, why is it that Sony have taken the approach they have? Why is it that they are being a lot less aggressive pushing the technical aspects of their console? They weren't like this with the PS3, as well as even somewhat the PS4. And if you recall back in the days of the PS2 and stuff, they were really pushing what the console could do. And apparently, this is because of Jim Ryan. He said that they want to focus on the results of the product, i.e., the games and what they can do, rather than specifically going in depth into each point. They want to keep things at a higher level, and just they don't believe that most customers either A, care about the stuff, B, understand it, and C, would do the research or really use it as a focus for buying the console. I.e., they're going to look at, are game good? Yes. Is console cheap? Yes, no. Does console provide experience I want? Yes or no. And apparently that's the reason. They are, when asking studios to discuss their games, they want bullet points, ray tracing, SSD, done, rather than going in depth into it. This does quite match up with what one of my other sources had told me. Even going into the reveal of the console, I was told that when the console were, I think the video I put out on this was something like why Sony had not revealed the PlayStation 5. And they told me that the Sony know that the hype had just built at that point so much. They knew their fans were mad at them, but they knew the moment that the games were shown, it didn't really seem to matter. So maybe this is true. I asked them, is it difficult to code for the PS5? And they said no. Within just a couple of weeks, they had code up and running despite lack of initial optimization. Interestingly, they also told me that the moment their code was up and running and they basically changed it a little bit to take advantage of SMT, simultaneous multi-threading, frame rates jumped significantly, which actually is quite close to what the Dirt 5 developers had said publicly about both the Xbox. I don't know if it's about PlayStation as well, but I remember there was an interview, I think it was Digital Foundry that had that. I also had confirmation from the developer that there is the same lower precision operations as the Xbox Series X, 4 and 8-bit operations. This is quite close to what another Sony source told me a long time ago. And this also, anyway, isn't particularly revealing because AMD publicly have confirmed that their upsampling technology works on both the Xbox and PlayStation, and of course the PC. This was a feature that I leaked a while ago that AMD were looking to implement this on their drivers, and I was told that the desktop implementation is similar to the Xbox and consoles. And again, that was an AMD source that told me this, so I assume that this is accurate. I was told that their hardware-based ray tracing solution is slightly customized, but they do not have an Xbox development kit. So they cannot tell me how it compares against the Xbox and PlayStation. I was told, though, that the peak figure of 321 G/sec Raybox peak that we kind of calculated, this is based on 4 TMU per CU, multiply that by the clock frequency. So in the case of the PS5, that's 4 times 36 multiplied by the clock frequency, which is peak at 2230. I was also told that with the game that they are coding, I do know the developer, they've told me their studio and stuff, but again, I'm asked to not discuss this stuff. I was told that the GPU hits a clock frequency of maximum about 95% of its time, with the more demanding sections dropping the frequency to about 2.1 gigahertz. However, this happens only with incredibly intense CPU loads, and I was also told that this happens less than one frame. So I was told that multiple times, in fact, per frame, the CPU can go up and down, shifting power. This matches perfectly with what we've learned from AMD's own Smart Shift technology, which of course the PS5 is based on, although I believe there is some customization there. I was also told that they think that developers will actually optimize their code better with better profiling tools as the development continues, and the architecture itself is better understood and they write smarter code. As for the CPU, it's more or less Zen 2 desktop, but with a few small changes. I was told that the level 3 cache is just 8 megabytes, but it's a unified L3 cache, more like what we see with the Zen 3 processors, but the actual CPU cores are Zen 2 basically. This actually more matches up with what one of my earlier sources for the PS5 told me quite a long time ago, that they believe that the Zen 3 unified cache made its way into the PS5, and I was told that the reasons behind this are latency. I was also told that there is not an additional large cache pool on the GPU. So there's no SRAM, anything like that. However, there is a lot of cache coherency on the APU, which you can think of as a kind of infinity cache, but it does not work the same as the desktop. This does help to offset the narrower memory bus of the PS5, which is only 448 gigabytes per second, but it is not the same thing as the infinity cache on the desktop GPU, and there is no additional cache on the GPU like an SRAM, a large SRAM cache like 32 megabytes or anything like that. I'm told that this is not the case. I was also told that memory addressing is much faster on the PS5 versus PS4. So this is seek and move times of data. And I was told, and I quote, this is the only time that I'm going to quote verbatim, data movement to CPU/GPU is literally fast tracked. End quote. Next, moving on, geometry engine. I was told is really the pièce de résistance of the console. It matches very much what Sony said in the Road to PS5 event, so I would suggest that you check out the Road to PS5 event. It is quite dry, and I would, if you're not ultra technically inclined, I would suggest just watching it at like 1.25 times speed or something like that. But there are some very interesting things he mentions about ray tracing performance as well as the geometry engine. Anyway, he said that the GE is a hardware block residing directly on the GPU. It is totally custom. Sony basically designed it. It's in-house and created custom, but it can be left completely and utterly down to the PS5 to do its thing and ignored by developers again. Sony himself stated this in the Road to PS5 event, so no new information there. He did state, though, the developer, that the strengths of the PS5 pipeline does come from the geometry engine. I was told that developers are being actively encouraged to investigate it, and they have been provided, robust code samples, technical demos, as well as information on how it functions. From what I am told, very few games at the moment currently leverage it to anywhere near its fullest potential. I was told that it does take a lot of time to learn. So even first-party games are really just starting to key into its functionality. They've said that it's going to be most likely second or third wave games, which really could be even 2022, possibly even 2023, before developers, especially non-first party developers, so the likes of EA or Ubisoft or whomever, will be familiar enough to really start to get a handle on this. Open world games, though, with massive numbers of draws, VR games, they are going to be particularly important to leverage this. I was told that the functionality closely emulates a mesh shader for DirectX 12 Ultimate, but there are differences. For one, according to the developer, it culls geometry even earlier and with more control than a mesh shader. And I was told that it is a compute-based primitive shader. It also, however, seems to be more trickier to code for than what mesh shading is for DirectX 12. So there is that to take into consideration. It seems that DX12's path, and I'm saying this only from the perspective of one developer, so this could be they're not as familiar with it or a billion other things, but to my understanding anyway, it seems that it's easier to complete and utterly customize how it works. And also, I was told that variable rate shading is part of this, but much earlier on in the pipeline. This again matches to what another source told me, that the variable rate shading is part and parcel of the geometry engine, and so therefore there is more control over the finer details of how things are being affected by VRS. So it seems like again, some of this stuff was hinted at by Mark Cerny. He did mention primitive shaders, which are compute-based. So it seems anyway that the developer is essentially saying that it does emulate very closely a mesh shader, but again, the key difference is it's hardware-based. And again, it seems that you can basically cull earlier in the cycle, but it does seem to be trickier to fully leverage. I was also told that the PS5's narrower memory bus is somewhat helped because of the IC on the silicon, as it allows the GPU to process data closer, but it's a priority and need basis. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to get a super Unfortunately, I wasn't able to completely and utterly clarify what that information was. So, yeah, you can take that as it is, really. I think that's just about it. I've again been sitting on some of this information for a while, but given the NDAs of the console are so close to being up, I'm just throwing it in. I have done my best to verify that the person does have access to a PlayStation 5 and development kits, and I do know that they are a developer, but again, they are not one of my regular sources. However, they have volunteered this to me. You can take it or leave it. I would personally take it with several pinches of salt, just like anything, until Sony do verify it. Hopefully, over the next few days, we do see the NDAs drop and we do start to learn more about the console. I suspect, and this is just purely a guess, that it's really going to be GDC next year, which obviously takes place in March, that we're going to get a really good understanding of the PS5, because developers will start to put conferences up, which will have a really kind of in-depth analysis as to how the consoles function and what challenges they've had moving on to next generation. So we could have a situation where we're waiting 4 or 5 months for developers to be a lot more open about this stuff, or at the very least start to release the information publicly. So with that said, I think that's just about it for this particular video. Hopefully you have enjoyed it. Little more stuff if you have. Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you soon. Take care of yourselves. Bye for now.